Good morning, Bookless Classroom. I am getting a little bit lax in the classroom, taking it easy between classes. It's my son's birthday. So for him, I'm kind of relaxing and enjoying the day. That's for you, honey. Because you know how I can get. Everybody knows how I can get. We are here in the Bookless Classroom, and this is Dr. Annette Feravich, and it is day 184 in the classroom. Whoop, whoop. We are long past a year of regular schooling. Nah, that's 180 days. Not long past it, 4 days past it. But we are jamming. I think we're jamming. We're jamming things in. We're jamming to music. We're jamming things into our heads. We are jamming. Jamming things into the program, jamming things into our heads. Those were the two different jammings, if you didn't get that. We are here reading The War to End All Wars. I don't think so. I think the one that I'm warring with my family right now, not my kids, happy birthday, Travis, April 23rd. But the other ones who are just trying to what? And that's another thing. You people, it's going to come down to you mixing up or taking my eggs and mixing them up and thinking that you had some right to do that in the order of science, in the name of science. And I mean, we already know you're going to hell. We'll find out what that is. That's a good way to put it. We already know you're going to hell. We'll find out what that is. We don't know what that is. That's kind of the interesting thing, right? Okay, let's get a move on. We are here on chapter 15. Before we get started with chapter 15, I did want to bring to your attention, though, something else. And that was a reading from our book, which is not our book, the book I'm reading. So again, the luxury of reading books online to you, you get educated. That's where my research is, which is something that I've always done. And then it gives me time, the luxury to be reading books that I want to read. And this is so good. I can't remember what. Oh, there was something I was reading in research and stuff, and they gave names of some really good books that really delved into Native American spirituality and just their whole belief system, right? Because their belief system was not separate. Their spirituality was not separate from who they were in their belief system like it is ours. And isn't that really strange? Even that kind of shift in a paradigm where God should be a complete and total part of your being. And why isn't the Christian God a complete and total part of your being? Like it is. Why is everything under a microscope and punishable then, right? Turns everything into something that's punishable. Warring factions all the time, right? And, you know, the best defense is a good offense. I could hear somebody saying that, you know. So anyway, I wanted to start with a quote from this book. I might have brought it up in this class. That's what we're reading in our reading room. I might have brought it up in this class yesterday, or I might have brought it up in the early birds, but it didn't matter because I read it in the early birds and it fit really well in. And now it doesn't so much fit in with our curriculum for today, but it doesn't matter because it was important. And I want to read this little excerpt. Ugh. That's okay though. That's okay. We can work with that. Keep reading. This is wonderful. Archive.org. I probably didn't mention this, and I also did not put archive.org in my references. But I could do it probably every single day because I use it all the time. Here I'm using it but I haven't gotten back to it for our early birds building their vocabulary skills. This is our catechism for the Catholic Church. So looking some things up in that, because I lost my copy, which really bothers me. I built my entire character building lesson from the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and that Catholic Church, and in particular those people at St. William over there, they hate it. They hate it that I had that and used it. They didn't have anything to complain about. And we were looking up Paschal and the word Paschal, which comes up a lot of time in there. So anyway, the point here being is that I use this internet or this archive.org a lot. And so here is the quote we'll start with today. And the lesson, not necessarily, necessarily tying it into what we have been reading, is what I am calling Bookless Classroom, would be called a paradigm shift. A paradigm shift. And a paradigm shift then is crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. Every time I think of paradigm shift, I think of Kyle Simon. That SOB who's always lurking in the background trying to look for something, some problem. Carl Simon. And his parents, Julie and Bruce, always looking for some kind of problem. He called me out when I had the picture of, by Ernest and whatever, of a paradigm shift. He called me out. He was like literally going to call authorities on me. He was literally going to do that. And authorities would normally say, make the correction. That's what they would do, but not him. He'd call authorities before he would bring it to my attention. And so I brought it to his attention. And I told him, it said it's not copyrighted. Where I got it from, it wasn't copyrighted. So, you know what? Eat my pile of you know what. Kyle Simon. Simon Says. Sheeple people. Happy birthday, Travis. I don't think I said it. It's April 23rd, 184 in the classroom. We are starting with this little paradigm shift, a way to think about things differently. But every time I say it, I can't think of it. I start with Kyle Simon. Although that started when he was in the 8th grade. So it didn't start the very first time. I thought about paradigm shifts and I love the idea. It's a completely new way of thinking about something. And given, the propensity for the groups around me to repeat things in order to make me feel like I'm crazy. Yeah, no, I don't feel like that. I feel like you're copying me for good reason. I remember thinking this. It could have been somebody, we were having a conversation. It could have been a class. It was when I was very young, though, that I was thinking about this. That wild in the wilderness, right? And where did that come from? Because when you think about it in the Bible, it's not that way, right? So, who's to say that there really wasn't a fall of man? Because when we see here, what we see here is a disconnect that is, as wide as the Pacific Ocean, right? A gap between man and his God. And basically giving the big middle finger to God. And, it's so interesting because I do wonder if where the clones are coming in and where would they come in? And they would come in as soldiers, I would think, in order to destroy and conquer in the name of science. And they could hide behind the fact that they're doing something good for you, right? Through imperialism, like we had talked about, of Africa, for example. But that's not their interest, right? Their interest isn't doing something good for you because that would contribute to your lifestyle without taking your lifestyle away. So that's what those SOBs did. Took away their lifestyle there in Africa. There is a short-sightedness there that borders on sinfulness, doesn't it? A short-sightedness that borders on sinfulness. Especially if you take it as we know eugenics and science has, to that nth degree, right? To the nth degree, to the ultimate whatever. The ultimate breaking of spirits. Breaking of spirits. And I have had enough people around me literally saying those words. Break her. Take her, break her. Hit her. Hitler. Hit her. Break her. I don't know. Does seem to me, though, it occurred on July 2nd for numerous reasons. It seems that way. Today, Wixom starts their book sale, but it's only for members of that tribe. And then it opens to the public. And that's okay. Membership fees and things like that, all those books. But getting rid of all those books, it just seems to me like, I don't know. Well, it seems to me, I do know. It seems to me like they're getting rid of what they don't know to be true. So everything is controversial. So they're throwing everything out with the, the baby with the bathwater, it seems to me. And that is out of this fear that's being talked about right here that I really, that struck such a chord with me. That is for sure. When I read it, that I have gone back to it in my mind, and now in the classroom, well, this is the first time in this classroom. Anyway, let's get to it. Let's get to it. By and large, there was no fear of nature in the Indian view of the world. Chief Luther Standing Bear remarked on the wildness of nature in his autobiography. And so, Janice in particular, I want you to think about this, right? I want you to think about this and this people spending their whole lives examining me. Spending their whole lives examining me, copying me, trying to take over whatever they think that they know about me, right? And this really does have a lot to do with science. And this belief that, in order to find out what makes, for example, somebody like me tick, you have to put it under a microscope. And you then not only can't have the possibility of turning these things into savages like we see with animals, right? You knowingly do this. You have no moral reserve to stop you. What viewpoint or belief would you have to stop you from pursuing your belief in the name of science, or any belief in the name of science? What would stop you? I mean, again, on the simplest terms, it doesn't stop you from desecrating graves. And I find that repulsive. I can watch it, right? And I understand it. But it's repulsive. And it's the beginnings, right? It's because I can understand it that it can be allowed. It's because you can understand it with your brain, it can therefore be allowed. It doesn't make it any less repulsive, right? We can understand how somebody would train a child, and a child from a very young age would learn a misbehavior, right? we can understand it. It doesn't make it less repulsive, nor does it make it uninvestigatable on the part of the person, him or herself. Introspection, right? It doesn't escape introspection. And that's the whole thing. We're talking about introspection in early birds. Science escapes every aspect of introspection. Do you understand that? Science escapes every aspect of introspection because it doesn't understand the right and wrong of desecrating a grave, nor does it understand then the consequences of injustice, which are feelings of injustice. They don't understand that. So here we are trying to get a head full of knowledge without any basic understanding of the human condition, which is really entirely, it would seem, the biggest drive that human beings have. I've heard it said before by Dr. Alexander, is the drive to overcome injustice. And he argued that that drive to overcome injustice is bigger than our drive for survival. And that makes Darwinian theory obsolete, along with a whole bunch of other things, right? But scientists have ignored that completely and entirely. So then the density of your brain really becomes a topic of conversation. Density in are you stupid? And density in are there neurons? And density in do you have mirror neurons? Density in that, right? There's density there. Questions of density. Is density for you just mass? And then there's the whole Catholic thing. Is density to you just mass? Because you're dense. It's just dense not to have a paradigm shift about humanity. And that is in favor of an emotional belief that somebody needs to snip at the core. And by the way, all of that kind of innuendo that then boils over into your play on words is also repulsive and demonstrates a real lack of intellect, a real lack of reading between the lines, of understanding intention, of understanding that mass is simply not the whole picture, of not even understanding things as simple as the whole is greater than the sum of its parts, not understanding that AI really can write a story, but can't get the gist of why one story would be better than another story, and that would have everything to do with humanity. I mean, really, the things that are escaping those people that are in charge border on density. It just borders on density. You have mass. That's all you've got. And you're usually high at mass. So you got high mass. Let's get a move on before I keep looking at my hair and disliking it more. But not more than you people doing that bullshit. Dense people who can't really get a clue, who sit over there and recite a whole bunch of nationalistic concepts with the very first being, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, and perverting that as well. Why? Because you're masochistic? You like punishment when you do wrong? That's your eye for an eye? That's your perversion of Jesus's statement, the golden rule? Because you're a bunch of fucking perverts. It's disgusting what you do. It's deplorable. It's repulsive what you do to people's words. It's repulsive. It's inhumane. It does demonstrate that you have roots with the animals. That somehow you didn't cross that border. You didn't cross that line into being human. You didn't do it. And you're recognizable, by the way. We recognize you. I can't name you because you effed everything up in the name of science. Switching kids around, trying to understand whether or not there is a natural inclination towards your biological offspring. You're repulsive. You desecrate graves in the name of science and then draw your own theories around it that have no evidence, and you call it science. I just can't even think. Here's your science. People are literally turning around and leaving your science, knowing what your science and injustice will do to them. Because you won't take on the real danger. Because you won't take on the real reason why God cannot return to this planet. And it's because of you scientists doing that in the name of science. Oh, do I call myself a scientist still? I do, because I motherfucking know what science is. Have a fucking paradigm shift, you assholes. You make everybody that angry. Have a fucking paradigm shift. Would you please? Why are things so wild? Because you color-coded them that way. Oh, what? Red and black, red and black, red and black. Color code them with all of your anger. Right there. Color coded with all of your anger. Color coded with all of your blood and your anger. Colors, colors, colors. Orange and blue, red and black, blue and white, blue and green. You're all nationalistic. It has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with the spirit within each of us. It has nothing to do with who God is. I am. And then fucking leave it alone. Leave it alone. But you can't. You gotta conquer. You gotta conquer. In the name of God? Always in the name of God? Have a fucking paradigm shift. By and large, there was no fear of nature in the Indian view of the world. Chief Luther Standing Bear remarked on the wildness of nature in his autobiography. We did not think of the great open plains, the beautiful rolling hills, and winding streams with tangled growth as wild. And now, all right, I'm going to read the next one, then I'll go here. Only to the white man was nature a wilderness, and only to him was the land infested with wild animals and savage people. What do children do in nature? What do little kids do in nature? Do they run and scream from nature? Oh no, I think that was B.F. Skinner who did that. I think that's what they did. Did the animals run and fear? Did the cats run in fear? No, I think that was Thorndike who did that. Creating this sense of fear in every single animal and no distinction between the ape and the human. So what I can do to the slug, who eventually evolves into, well, I can do it to a human being then. Have a fucking paradigm shift, for Christ's sake. Children do not respond innately to nature that way. And when you're making every adult so neurotic about the nature of themselves that they have to what? Take how many pills to avoid cancer? Which is pretty ironic, isn't it? Right? That I'm June 28th and a Cancer. Is that what you're trying to get them to avoid? Because that's what I think. That's what I think. Because I've had paradigm shifts all over the place. You don't want people to get cancer. I don't know. Let's go. And then we talked about really emphasize savage people. Yeah, I'm sorry. Who brought that concept to the world? They were literally, not only were they turning away from you, knowing what your technology would be the consequence of them turning away. Right? I mean, go ahead and try and resurrect from this MFer, and then what? Obliterating them? To see if the phoenix rises? Well, we gotta know. It's science. We gotta know. Turning living things into savages. Defensive savages. That's the goal. Look at what this human nature brings. They act like animals. Fuck you. Fuck you. What else did you expect? Because you didn't expect God, did you? You didn't expect God. And that's what this whole thing is about. They didn't see God come through for this group of people like he had promised. I don't know. Who? Evangelicals? That's what it seems like. For a whole lot of believers, God didn't come through. So they're like, where are you? We're going to find out. Really? I told you I am. Back off. It's not really, it's just not, rocket science. It's just not. It's just not. Stop standing there with your hands on your dicks and your thumbs up your assholes saying I'm a dictator. We know. We know. Take your seat. Take your fucking seat in the classroom, asshole. We know. We know, Greg Newsom. We know. I know. Sticking your finger in my asshole and then putting a whatever over. That is, you are repulsive. And the only way you can get away with that is being okay that you came from an ape. We know. We know. We know. We know, Lori. We know. You came from I don't even know what that is. Oh, a jackal. You came from a jackal. I don't even know what a jackal is. They're kind of like a hyena, though. I think that's what they are. You came from a jackal. We all know that. Jeffrey Feiger. Who are you people? Just a bunch of C words. And you're the C word. The reason why you're the C word is because you don't let people be. You don't let them be. Now, why wouldn't that? Why wouldn't you do that? Why wouldn't you do that? You're so bored with yourself. Why are you so bored with yourself? No introspection. Chucky, same thing. Same thing. No introspection. I've never seen somebody so void of mirror neurons. So back to the wilderness. To us, it was tame. Earth was bountiful, and we were surrounded with the blessings of the great mystery. What people, and then to sit over there and just practically criminalize people who are tree huggers, that becomes a giant black mark on them because you cannot recognize God in creation. But you do recognize that in order for people to shut up about it, that you have to manipulate them and drive them into fear. And then you abandon your God and your religion in the name of science that you don't even obey, just simple observational laws of science. That's somebody with the chip on their shoulder so big, they are blinded to science, blinded to it. They were talking about how blind you are here, that you don't even recognize things that were part of history and drawn in the caves in New Mexico and Arizona, because they were natural phenomena. You're just like, oh, that's nothing. That's like a star. That's a cosmic fart. Natural phenomenon. You don't even appreciate. Then what do? Put up the Hubble telescope, all those fake pictures? What the F, that new telescope? All those fake pictures? Honest to gosh, what is the matter with you? What do? Put a little piece of acid on a negative and it changes colors and you're like, there's nebula. Shame on you. All over the place, shame on you. And what that means to me is I wish you to feel ashamed to the extent that you perverted the Creator and his creations, so much so that you have to pervert people into being tree huggers. What, you never took a look at a fucking leaf before? Scientist, recreate it, motherfucker. You asshole. You can't even get AI to write a really good story because they cannot distinguish good from bad. I don't know how dense that makes you. Like the density of your brain has to be like lead. Did you eat your own bullets? I no comprendo. Let's keep it going. Not until the hairy man from the east came and with brutal frenzy heaped injustices upon us, and then said, where's God? Where's God? Where's God? If there's a God, he'll be able to solve this problem. Look at that injustice over there. Yeah, you fucking beetle rolling your shit in the dirt. Growing it into one great big stone. When the very animals of the forest began fleeing from his approach, then it was that for us the Wild West began. That's phenomenal. God said, it's said in the Bible that I didn't have that up there, I'm sorry. It's said in the Bible that our relationship with animals would be that we could walk amongst them and not have fear. So where did that fear come from then? Let's think about it now. Where would animals have a fear of man? Where would that come from? Oh, I don't know. Maybe you not having any consideration, not only for the bombing of the homes of all of that nature of God's creation. But I've thought about this a lot. All the blood on that land. If there is a spirit in the trees, then what would you think about what the trees would feel from all of that destruction? And that's what they don't want you to know. Nobody's elevating. You don't have to elevate a tree to a feeling human being in order to understand that there's a possibility that trees and forests could be affected from the bloodshed of those that are supposed to what? Be protecting God's creation. He said domesticate. No, pay attention to that word. There was a sermon on that word, and it was so long ago I wouldn't be able to replenish it again. But that's just another perversion of words. That's not what God didn't mean to tame. Domesticate didn't mean to tame it. Yeah, well, tame it. Nice job. You got the animals to hate you. You got animals to hate you. And I am saying, I have said this before, all of it, which is supposed to, I think, be another element of bringing you to faith. But all you got is those fucking perverts out there changing things up. Why do I always have people who are so surprised how I look? Why is that? Oh, I don't know, YouTube. Maybe my videos, the real videos aren't getting out there. Absolutely deplorable. Okay. Now we are on chapter 15, Losing the Peace. How did that happen? How did that happen? It was supposed to be the war to end all wars. A war to bring peace. Don't you understand? A war to bring peace. Don't you understand? What are you, dense? War to force people into peace. War to force the wilderness to be tamed. Don't you understand? It's a wilderness out there. What are you, dense? Armistice Day. Thousands of Philadelphians celebrate the end of the war beneath a replica of the Statue of Liberty on Broad Street. Well, it's one way to bring people together in the name of their country, isn't it? To have the heroes come on board at the very last minute in all kinds of numbers, with all kinds of artillery to be sure we're not coming into this war unless we know we can win it. They won the war. I mean, yeah, thank God, right? Thank God. How does this sound like Universal Studios all over the place? We have a hero. Get the sheeple to pay attention to the hero. The hero's falling apart. The hero's falling apart. Who's doing that? A teacher who's living in an apartment. What's her class called? The classroom. Not a good side. I'm going to have to do something about that for sure. You think I'm not? I totally am. You MFers are always trying to make me look like crap. Here's the rest of that. Which sometimes isn't hard to do. I get it. I get it. There you go. And let's get you a little music. Music! And I'm going to be right back. Luckily, the music guy is always here. Here's my husband. Here's this a great picture of me and my husband. I just love this picture. I have this out. I don't have all my pictures, but there we go. Isn't that awesome? That was a long time ago. I was able to fit into that dress. It has no give in that dress whatsoever. But all my beautiful, I don't know, I could fit into it now, but all my beautiful clothes, somebody stole. From what I understand, they took my clothes. That's what they told me anyway. So stealing my clothes. Anyway, there's me and my husband. And I love that picture. Happy birthday, Travis. Yesterday was 5 years since he passed. And we're still struggling with all of this. They're not sitting there talking with me about it. And that's because all of this is just a bunch of bullshit, organized crime around me trying to save what they shouldn't, necessarily be trying to save, right? Corporate America, right? No, what we need to be saving are our values that this country stands for. That's what we need to be saving. Okay. So, on the morning of November 11th, 1918, Major Keith Officer, an Australian, was watching the minutes go around on his large old-fashioned hunting watch as he waited for the ceasefire to begin. Nearby, there was a German machine gun unit giving our troops a lot of trouble, he remembered. They kept on firing until practically 11 o'clock. At precisely 11 o'clock, an officer stepped out of their position, stood up, lifted his helmet, and bowed to the British troops. He then fell in all his men in the front of the trench and marched them off. I always thought that this was a wonderful display of confidence in British chivalry because the temptation to fire on them must have been very great. Except for the fact that I think there was already something about bringing them back to the United States. The armistice came the day we dreamed of, recalled British Sergeant Major Richard Tobin. The gun stopped, the fighting stopped. The gun stopped, the fighting stopped. 4 years of noise and bangs ended in silence. The killings had stopped. The killings. We were stunned. We already looked at this picture. Let's look at this picture. American troops returning home from France sail into New York Harbor. That's a weird, that's weird. I wouldn't have expected the ship to look like that. Right? Like with all those masts and things, it looks so old-fashioned is what it looks like, doesn't it? Doesn't that ship look so old-fashioned? Where were their new liners and cruisers? Anyway. For our soldiers is what I mean. We were stunned. I had been out since 1914. I should have been happy. I was sad. I thought of the slaughter, the hardships, the waste, and the friends I had lost. Isn't that interesting? Talk about another paradigm shift, a different way of thinking for sure, right? So to be sad that the war, it's like just like that. So in my mind, that statement is, you could have done this 4 years ago and you didn't. It was just like that. All of a sudden it was just like that. You could have done it 4 years ago and you didn't. That's what that sounds like to me. I didn't go on the other side. I should have. It's okay. News of the armistice spread swiftly around the world. In every Allied capital and cities all over the world, exuberant crowds poured into the streets, cheering and hugging soldiers in uniform, singing, dancing, and rejoicing. We danced on the buses. We danced on the lorries, which are trucks. We danced on the pavement. We shouted, we sang, wrote Sir Evelyn Rendy, recalling Armistice Day in London. We cheered and cheered again and again, while church bells rang out in a peal of jubilation. This also clearly seems like an experiment to me, a national experiment to me. So get the people behind your warring, and it won't matter what the soldiers have to say. Okay? Those who had lost loved ones in the war or had been crippled or maimed could not so easily put sorrowful memories aside. Robert Graves, badly wounded in the Battle of Somme, had been posted back to England. He was training cadets at a camp in North Wales when the armistice was announced. He had just learned of the deaths in battle of two close friends, and 2 months earlier his wife's brother had been killed in France. Armistice night hysteria did not touch our camp much, though some of the Canadians stationed there went down to the town of Ryle to celebrate in true overseas style. Graves wrote, "The news sent me out walking alone, cursing and sobbing and thinking of the dead." The cost of World War I in human lives is difficult to estimate with accuracy and is impossible to imagine. About 65 million men were mobilized to fight. During 4 years of slaughter, more than half of those men became casualties. 8.5 million killed, 21 million wounded, nearly 8 million missing in action or taken prisoner. In addition, an estimated 10 million civilians perished of war-related famine and disease. Among the combatant nations in Europe, there were scarcely a family that had not lost a son, a brother, or a father. Some families lost every male member, leaving behind widows and orphans and shattered dreams. After the war, people would speak of a lost generation. And among those who survived, hundreds of thousands had lost an arm or a leg, or had been hideously deformed by battle wounds. And that says nothing of their psyche after all of this, the mental anguish that they must have suffered and their families must have suffered. Today, the entire length of the Western Front is marked by hundreds of graveyards and memorials to the soldiers who lost their lives fighting there. The Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery holds the graves of 14,246 war dead, most of whom fell during the U.S. Army's Meuse-Argonne offensive in the autumn of 1918. And this speaks then of the reverence that we have to history without a reverence to what were the events about, which is what this book is saying. You've lost in the staleness of the history of this. This is the war. This is the battle. This is how many dead, right? The staleness of this, you've lost the message, right? Or the monotony of it, or the mechanics of it. You've lost all humanity when you turn this into a historical event. Well, then it has to be science, then it has to be facts, right? Just like the news used to be. Well, and then you've got, what we've got now, which is filled with opinion, right? I'm reading from a published book. I didn't publish it, right? So I'm hoping these are the facts. And this is what has created so much chaos. What are the facts? What are the facts? What are the facts? Quit trying to subdue people and just give them the facts, right? I'm not saying that, we can't do that in a graceful way. But again, I mean, good gosh, the way that you've perverted even, godly terms like grace, and now we have to have a stupid effing movie called Savage Grace. Go screw yourself. Honest to gosh. Perverted pieces of shit, making everything holy into something that's unholy because you enjoy that more like a bunch of effing animals. Honest to gosh. Who are you? Today, the entire length, marked by hundreds of grave sites, 14,246 war dead, most of whom fell during the U.S. Army's Meuse-Argonne offensive in the autumn of 1918. The graves are still visited often by the grandchildren and great-grandchildren of the men buried there, scattered among the long rows of headstones. Bouquets of fresh flowers and cards of remembrance pay tribute to those who gave their lives nearly a century ago. And how much land do we have devoted to that? And so now we've got remembrances of American war battles all over the planet. Along with the toll of human lives, entire towns and villages had been wiped off the map to be remembered, if at all, by means of small stone mountains that resemble graveyard headstones. Vast expanses of fertile farmland had been blasted and burned into pock-marked wasteland. The European economy had been devastated, and war had left a bitter legacy of rage and a desire for revenge. After 4 years of misery and suffering, it is little wonder that people everywhere in Europe hoped and prayed, and to some extent believed, that this would be the war to end all wars. Not when it filled people with such revenge. The only people who were saying it's the war to end all wars were the people who created that war. What they created were a whole bunch of people who wanted revenge. All right, so here we've got the pictures. To the left, the Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery in 2008, 90 years after the war ended. So children and grandchildren remembering the heroic nature of the American soldiers and the devastation of the world without what? Ammunition, right? This is really devastating. All of this is devastating. In January 1919, Allied statesmen met near Paris to discuss a final peace settlement. Dozens of nations were invited to attend, but in the end, the conference was dominated by three men. French Premier Georges Clemenceau, British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, and American President Woodrow Wilson. The Premier Georges Clemenceau, British Prime Minister, and David Lloyd George. Okay. And American President. Clemenceau, with the wholehearted support of his countrymen, was determined to make sure that Germany would never again be powerful enough to threaten the peace of Europe. In the French view, everything possible had to be done to keep Germany weak and divided. I could see that. Lloyd George also wanted Germany disarmed, but he was more cautious than Clemenceau. Before the war, Germany had been Britain's largest trading partner. Germany must be punished, Lloyd George agreed, but not so severely that the country would be left destitute or vulnerable to the spread of communism from Russia. Wilson's chief concern was his idealistic scheme for a world organization to prevent future wars. His vision of a new Europe included a League of Nations in which great and small states alike would settle their differences peacefully instead of going to war. I have to write that down because I'm almost positive I have a cornerstone book on the League of Nations. And given all the controversy over the League, the United Nations, right? Yeah, we'll pay all of your salaries for the United Nations, but we get the big say-so. I want to look into this, the building of this united force which really seems to be doing some introspection about this whole surprise war on the people, where people, civilians were bombed and hurt. The trench warfare was created that really gave no side any movement. And then the death toll was like no other. People, civilians were really having, and then this really beginning from a family feud and some, racism against the Slavic people, right? That's what the book is saying to me. Disagreements among Wilson, Lloyd George, and Clemenceau erupted into angry arguments. Negotiations almost broke down several times before a final agreement was reached in June 1919. So here they are, MFers are starting wars again. The result, a compromise imposed harsh peace terms on a defeated Germany. Here we've got Allied leaders at Versailles Peace Conference, left to right. British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, Italian Prime Minister Vittorio Orlando, French Prime Minister Georges Clemenceau, and the United States President Woodrow Wilson. Orlando was frequently left on the sidelines when critical negotiations took place among the other three. Okay. What do we have here? Where are we here? 11:27, 11:30. Okay, this is what I'm going to do. I actually am going to finish this. I don't have a time on there. I'm actually going to finish this tomorrow. This is our Bookless Classroom. We're going to wrap this up. So I want a conclusion on this book. I already have got some ideas then just now for where we're going to go historically in our Bookless Classroom. However, I have an engaging that I need to go through, right? So I'm thinking that our next week's class, we're going to finish tomorrow. We're going to finish this book. We're going to talk about it, do some introspection on it. And next week's class is likely going to be our engaging class. What I have written down there is, what is the word here? Famous or infamous. If you don't care, you might be an atheist. That's where we're probably going in our engaging classroom next week. If you remember, what we've got is we've got Bookless Classroom for as long as we're going to do it. And then sometimes engaging. We're doing kind of third class. Well, I was going to say 2.5. That's not fair to reading room. Reading room at least keeps their timeline where it's supposed to be. It's the other classes that screw with the reading room. So 3 classes we have. And so we switch out Bookless Classroom for engaging. This is day 184 in the classroom. It is April 23rd. My husband's anniversary, 5 years yesterday of his passing. There we are. And today is my son's birthday. He is 32. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thanks for joining me here in the classroom.